Hi friends, Jackie here. We're starting on paragraph 12 of the Advent of Divine Justice. Greetings from Tempe, Arizona. The one chief remaining citadel, the mighty arm which still raises aloft the standard of an unconquerable faith, is none other than the blessed community and the followers of the most great name in the North American continent. By its works, and through the unfailing protection vouchsafed to it by an almighty providence, this distinguished member of the body of the constantly interacting Baha'i communities of East and West bids fair to be universally regarded as the cradle, as well as the stronghold of that future New World Order, which is at once the promise and the glory of the dispensation associated with the name of Baha'u'llah. Let anyone inclined to either belittle the unique station conferred upon this community, or to question the role it will be called upon to play in the days to come, ponder the implication of these pregnant and highly illuminating words uttered by Abdu'l-Baha and addressed to it at a time when the fortunes of a world groaning beneath the burden of a devastating war had reached their lowest ebb. Quote, "The continent of America," he so significantly wrote, "is in the eye of the one true God, the land wherein the splendors of his light shall be revealed, where the mysteries of his faith shall be unveiled, where the righteous will abide and the free assemble." End quote. Already the community of the believers of the North American continent, at once the prime mover and pattern of the future communities which the faith of Baha'u'llah is destined to raise up through the length and breadth of the Western Hemisphere, has, despite the prevailing gloom, shown its capacity to be recognized as the torchbearer of that light, the repository of those mysteries, the exponent of that righteousness, and the sanctuary of that freedom. To what other light can these above quoted words possibly allude, if not to the light of the glory of the golden age of the faith of Baha'u'llah? What mysteries could Abdu'l-Baha have contemplated except the mysteries of that embryonic world order now evolving within the matrix of his administration? What righteousness, if not the righteousness whose reign that age and order can alone establish? What freedom but the freedom which the proclamation of his sovereignty in the fullness of time must bestow? The community of the organized promoters of the faith of Baha'u'llah in the American continent, the spiritual descendants of the Dawnbreakers, of an heroic age. I've stumbled because it's so beautiful. The community of the organized promoters of the faith of Baha'u'llah in the American continent, the spiritual descendants of the Dawnbreakers of an heroic age, who by their death proclaimed the birth of that faith, must in turn usher in, not by their death, but through living sacrifice, that promised world order, the shell ordained to enshrine that priceless jewel, the world civilization of which the faith itself is the sole begetter, while its sister communities are bending beneath the tempestuous winds that beat upon them from every side. This community, preserved by the immutable decrees of the omnipotent ordainer and deriving continual sustenance from the mandate with which the tablets of the divine plan have invested it, is now busily engaged in laying the foundations and in fostering the growth of those institutions which are to herald the approach of the age destined to witness the birth and rise of the world order of Baha'u'llah. A community relatively negligible in its numerical strength, separated by vast distances from both the focal center of its faith and the land wherein the preponderating mass of its fellow believers reside, bereft in the main of material resources and lacking in experience and in prominence, ignorance of the beliefs, concepts, and habits of those people and races from which its spiritual founders have sprung, wholly unfamiliar with the languages in which its sacred books were originally revealed, constrained to place its sole reliance upon an inadequate rendering of only a fragmentary portion of the literature embodying its laws, its tenets, and its history, subjected from its infancy to tests of extreme severity, involving at times the defection of some of the most prominent members, having to contend ever since its inception and in an ever-increasing measure with the forces of corruption, moral laxity, and ingrained prejudice, such a community in less than half a century, and unaided by any of its sister communities, whether in the East or in the West, has by virtue of the celestial potency with which an all-loving master has abundantly endowed it, lent an impetus to the onward march of the cause it has espoused, which the combined achievements of its co-religionists in the West have failed to rival. What other community, it can confidently be asked, has been instrumental in fixing the pattern and in imparting the original impulse to those administrative institutions that constitute the vanguard of the world order of Baha'u'llah? What other community has been capable of demonstrating with such consistency the resourcefulness, the discipline, the iron determination, the zeal and perseverance, the devotion and fidelity so indispensable to the erection and the continued extension of the framework within which those nascent institutions can alone multiply and mature? What other community has proved itself to be fired by so noble a vision, or willing to rise to such heights of self-sacrifice, or ready to achieve so great a measure of solidarity as to be able to raise in so short a time and in the course of such crucial years an edifice that can well deserve to be regarded as the greatest contribution ever made by the West to the cause of Baha'u'llah? What other community can justifiably lay claim to have succeeded through the unsupportive efforts of one of its humble members in securing the spontaneous allegiance of royalty to its cause, and in winning such marvelous and written testimonies to its truth? What other community has shown the foresight, the organizing ability, the enthusiastic eagerness that have been responsible for the establishment and multiplication throughout its territory of those initial schools, which, as time goes by, will, on the one hand, evolve into powerful centers of Baha'i learning, and on the other, provide a fertile recruiting ground for the enrichment and consolidation of its teaching force? What other community has produced pioneers combining to such a degree the essential qualities of audacity, of consecration, of tenacity, of self-renunciation and unstinted devotion that have prompted them to abandon their homes and forsake their all and scatter over the surface of the globe and hoist in its uttermost corners the triumphant banner of Baha'u'llah. Who else but the members of this community have won the eternal distinction of being the first to raise the call of Ya Baha'u'llah in such highly important and widely scattered centers and territories as the hearts of both the British and French empires, Germany, the Far East, the Balkan states, the Scandinavian countries, Latin America, the islands of the Pacific, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, and now more recently, the Baltic states. Who else but those same pioneers have shown themselves ready to undertake the labor, to exercise the patience, and to provide the funds required for the translation and publication in no less than 40 languages of their sacred literature, the dissemination of which is an essential prerequisite to any effectively organized campaign of teaching? What other community can lay claim to have had a decisive share in the worldwide efforts that have been exerted for the safeguarding and the extension of the immediate surroundings of its holy shrines, as well as for the preliminary acquisition of the future sites of its international institutions at its world center? What other community can, to its eternal credit, claim to have been the first to frame its national and local institutions, thereby laying down the fundamental lines of the twin charters designed to regulate the activities, define the functions, and safeguard the rights of its institutions? What other community can boast of having simultaneously acquired the legally secured basis of its national endowments, thus paving the way for a similar action on the part of its local communities? What other community has achieved the supreme distinction of having obtained, long before any of its sister communities had envisaged such a possibility, the necessary documents assuring the recognition by both the federal and state authorities of its spiritual assemblies and national endowments? And finally, what other community has had the privilege and been granted the means to succor the needy, to plead the cause of the downtrodden, and to intervene so energetically for the safeguarding of Baha'i edifices and institutions in countries such as Persia, Egypt, Iraq, Russia, and Germany, where at various times its fellow believers have had to suffer the rigors of both religious and racial persecution? That concludes paragraph 17. Whew, quite a legacy.